My name is Ruth. I believe the greatest legacy a person could leave was family. The sound of laughter in these old walls, the smudgy fingerprints on the windows from little hands, the worn spot on the sofa where my Harold used to sit, these were the treasures I thought I'd built my life around. I was a simple woman. I found my joy in the soil of my garden and the faces of my grandchildren. I learned a terrible, quiet truth. The family I had poured my soul into. Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. Saw me not as a grandmother, but as a vault. The day started with such promise. The sun was the kind of golden you only see in early autumn, spilling through my kitchen window and catching the dust motes so they looked like flecks of glitter. I'd baked my famous cinnamon coffee cake, the one with the crunchy walnut streusel topping that my grandson, Liam, used to say could solve any problem. The whole house smelled of sugar and nostalgia. I'd even put on the lavender sweater my granddaughter, Chloe, bought me 2 Christmases ago. It was soft and expensive, and I remember feeling so touched that she'd spent her hard-earned money on me. I was waiting for them. My son, David, and his wife, Sandra, had promised a small family gathering. Just them, the kids, though Chloe and Liam were in their 20s now, hardly kids, and me. A quiet lunch. That's all I wanted. To feel surrounded, the clock on the mantel, the one Harold wound every night without fail, ticked past 1 o'clock. Then 1:30. The coffee cake was no longer warm. I'd covered it with a glass dome, but I knew it was settling, getting denser. Like my heart. Finally, at 1:45, I heard car doors slam. My spirits lifted, foolishly, like a balloon. I smoothed my sweater and went to the door. There they were. David, looking strained, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Sandra, clutching her oversized purse like a shield. And Chloe and Liam, both glued to their phones, their thumbs flying across the screens. Happy birthday, Mom, David said, leaning in for a quick, dry kiss on my cheek. We would have been here sooner, but the traffic from the club was just dreadful, Sandra said, breezing past me and setting her purse on the hall table. She didn't look at the cake. She didn't comment on the flowers I'd picked from the garden and arranged in a vase on the table. No trouble at all, I said, my voice too bright. I'm just glad you're here. Lunch is all ready. We sat at the dining table I'd inherited from my own mother. The conversation was like trying to start a fire with wet wood. I asked Chloe about her new job in marketing. It's fine, Nana, she said, not looking up from her phone. Just a lot of busy work, but the connections are good. Speaking of connections, she finally looked at me, her eyes wide and calculating. You remember my friend Brittany? Her grandmother just bought her a condo, a full-floor one, with a terrace. Can you imagine? At our age, a foothold in the property market is everything. I felt a small chill. That's very generous of her grandmother. Well, she has the means, Chloe said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Liam, my sweet boy who used to build elaborate forts with my sofa cushions, chimed in. Yeah, Nana, you're sitting on a gold mine here. This house, this land, it's prime real estate. You must have all sorts of plans for it, right? I looked at my son. David was studying his plate, pushing a piece of roast chicken around with his fork. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My plans are to live in it, I said quietly, as I have for the last 45 years. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of similar comments. Questions about my investments. Hints about the financial burden of maintaining such a large property. Suggestions about downsizing to a lovely, modern apartment, one of those new assisted living places. You wouldn't have to worry. About a thing, Mom, David said, finally speaking up. They have activities, social events. I have my garden, I said, my throat tight. And my friends. That's all the socializing I need. When the cake was served, the compliments felt hollow. Just like I remember, Liam said, but he only ate 2 bites before pushing the plate away. Chloe didn't touch hers. The climax of the afternoon was the gifts. Sandra presented me with a large, flat, professionally wrapped box. From all of us, she said with a tight smile. I opened it carefully. Inside was a sleek, modern digital picture frame. It's Wi-Fi enabled, Chloe explained, taking it from me and powering it on. We can upload photos to it remotely. See? We've already preloaded it with some of our best ones. The frame cycled through a series of pictures. There was David, Sandra, Chloe, and Liam on a ski trip in Aspen. Another of them on a yacht, sunglasses on, drinks in hand. Another of Chloe standing in front of a new sports car, a car I hadn't known she owned. There were dozens of them. Pictures of a life of luxury, of trips I hadn't been invited on, of purchases I hadn't known about. And in not a single one of those pictures was I. I was the audience for their beautiful, expensive lives. Not a participant. My hands trembled as I set the frame down. It's very modern, I managed to say. We thought it would help you feel connected to us, David said, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something in his face, guilt, perhaps, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. They left an hour later, with more hurried kisses and promises to see me soon. The door closed, and the silence that descended was heavier and colder than it had been before they arrived. I stood in the hallway, looking at the digital frame, which was now showing a picture of them all laughing on a tropical beach, connected to them. I walked into the dining room. The table was a wreck of dirty plates and half-eaten cake. The beautiful, uneaten cake. I picked up Liam's plate and looked at the single, forlorn fork mark in the slice. And then I saw it. Tucked underneath the plate, as if it had been slipped there secretly, was a small, folded square of paper. Frowning, I put the plate down and picked it up. It was a flyer, crisply printed. At the top it read, Harborview Luxury Senior Residences, a new chapter in refined living. And scrawled across the top in blue pen, in my son David's handwriting, was, Mom, let's talk about this. The equity from this house could set us all up for life. Us, the words seemed to echo in the silent, empty house. I sank into a chair, the flyer clutched in my hand. The pieces, all the little comments, the neglect, the distant hugs, the expensive gifts that were more about their taste than mine, it all clicked into a horrifying, perfect picture. They didn't see my home. They saw my equity. They didn't see their mother and grandmother. They saw an obstacle, a stubborn old woman sitting on their inheritance. The tears didn't come then. They were frozen somewhere deep inside me, behind a wall of sheer, unadulterated betrayal. I sat there as the golden afternoon light faded into a cold, blue twilight, the digital picture frame in the other room silently testifying to a life from which I had been thoroughly, completely, and deliberately erased. This birthday wasn't a celebration. It was a prospecting visit, and I was the mine they were so eager to claim. After they left, I didn't clean up. I couldn't. The mess in the dining room felt like the mess inside my head. I just sat there in Harold's old armchair, the one that still faintly smells of his pipe tobacco, and I stared at that cruel little flyer until the words blurred. Harborview Luxury Senior Residences. It sounded so sterile, so final. A place where you go to wait. I wasn't ready to just wait. I was still living. But according to my family, my living was an inconvenience. The house grew dark around me. I didn't turn on the lights. I let the shadows gather in the corners, let them climb the walls and swallow the furniture whole. It felt appropriate. The digital picture frame from the hallway cast a sickly, shifting glow, a silent disco of my own exclusion. Click. A beach in Bali I'd never seen. Click. A new car I hadn't been told about. Click. My family, faces lit with a joy I hadn't been part of. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't a new feeling, I realized. It had been growing for years, a slow, quiet poison. The forgotten Mother's Days. The Christmases that always seemed to be at their house, where I felt like a guest who'd arrived too early and stayed too late. The way conversations would suddenly stop when I walked into the room. I thought I was being sensitive, old, out of touch. I made excuses for them. David was busy with his firm. Sandra was a social butterfly. The kids were building their lives. I told myself that was what we worked for, wasn't it? To give our children the freedom to fly so far they barely looked back. But now I saw it. They weren't just flying, they were circling. I finally stood up, my joints protesting. I moved through the dark house like a ghost, my hand trailing along the familiar walls. This was the wall where we'd measured David's height every birthday, little pencil marks chronicling his growth. This was the floorboard that squeaked, the one Harold always meant to fix and never did, a sound that became the heartbeat of our home. This was the window where I'd stood for hours, waiting for his car to come up the lane after his long shifts. Every inch of this house was a page in the story of our family, a story written in love and sacrifice. And they saw it as a book they could sell. I ended up in my small study, a room they always made fun of for being stuck in the 80 seconds. I clicked on the green-shaded desk lamp, and a pool of warm light fell on my old oak desk. And there it was, sitting right on top, where I'd been working on it just last week. My simple household ledger. It was just a notebook, really. Columns of numbers in my careful handwriting, groceries, utilities, property, taxes. But as I looked at it, a wild, painful idea took root. If they were so focused on my money, maybe I needed to look at it too. Not as numbers, but as a story. A ledger not of dollars, but of love. I opened the book to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "For David," and then I began to remember. Not with my heart, which was too bruised and broken, but with the cold, clear eye of an accountant. I started with the big things. The $80,000 we gave him for the down payment on his first house. Harold and I had scrimped for years for that. We'd skipped vacations, driven old cars, patched up old clothes. We'd called it our David Fund. I remembered the look on his face when we handed him the check. He'd hugged us so tight. "I'll pay you back every penny," he'd promised. We'd never seen a cent, and we never wanted to. That was what parents did. Then there was the $30,000 for Chloe's college. The gift, so she wouldn't start her life burdened by debt. The $20,000 for Liam's failed startup. The loan that we all knew would never be repaid. The $15,000 for their dream vacation to Europe for their 20th anniversary. "You deserve it, Mom," David had said. "After all you've done for us." The numbers started to add up, a staggering column of giving. But it was the small things, the endless, quiet drips of support, that truly broke me open. I started listing them, my pen scratching furiously in the quiet room. Groceries, every week for the first 5 years of their marriage, because Sandra couldn't figure out how to cook for two on a budget. The monthly allowance we sent David through grad school. The car. Insurance we paid for Chloe until she was 25. The emergency credit card we gave Liam for gas and food that was always maxed out on restaurants and bars. The birthday checks, the Christmas checks, the just because checks. I filled page after page. It was a torrent of memory, each entry a small stone of sacrifice I had willingly carried. I had seen it as building a foundation for them, laying down a soft path for their feet. I never, not for 1 second, kept a tally. Until now. When I finally put the pen down, my hand was cramping. I looked at the total. It was a number that took my breath away. It was more than the current value of this house, far more. And what had it bought me? A digital picture frame of a life I wasn't part of. A flyer for a retirement home. A birthday cake, left uneaten. The cold knot in my stomach melted, replaced by a hot, sharp anger. This wasn't just ingratitude. This was a calculated erasure. They had taken every single penny, every sacrifice, and used it to build a world where I had no place. My love had been their seed capital, and now they saw me as the final asset to liquidate. I heard Harold's voice in my head, as clear as if he were standing beside me. He'd been a practical man, a good man, but not a soft one. "Ruth," he would have said, "you can't buy love, but some people will sure as hell rent it out until you're bankrupt." I picked up the ledger. It felt heavy, dense with the weight of all those years, all those gifts, all that love that had been so carelessly spent. This wasn't just a book of numbers anymore. It was evidence. And I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that I needed to show it to someone. I couldn't hold this pain alone in the dark. I needed my pillars. I needed Grace and Clara. But first, I had to survive the night. I sat there until the sun came up, the ledger open on my lap, the story of my life laid bare in columns of black and white. The love was all in the margins, and, now, even that was fading. The morning after my birthday, the world felt different. The sunlight was too harsh, the birdsong too cheerful. I moved through my routines like an automaton, making tea, watering the plants, but my hands were shaking. The ledger was still on my desk, a sleeping dragon of truth I had awakened. I knew I had to call them. I needed their voices, their wisdom, to tell me I wasn't going crazy. I called Grace first. Her voice, soft as worn velvet, came on the line. "Ruthie, is everything all right, sweetheart?" Just hearing her say my name broke the dam. I started to cry, deep, ragged sobs that I hadn't been able to summon the night before. "Grace," I choked out. Can you and Clara come over?" She was at my door within 20 minutes, her kind face etched with worry. She didn't say a word, just opened her arms and pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and unconditional love. I cried into her shoulder, this sweet, gentle woman who had been my rock since we were girls, selling lemonade on a dusty summer street. Clara arrived 10 minutes later, and she didn't knock. She never did. She just swept in, a force of nature in a practical trench coat, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. Me, a wreck in Grace's arms, the still unclean dining table, the sinister glow of the digital frame. What happened? Clara's voice was like a blade being unsheathed. Did someone die? Worse. I whispered, pulling away from Grace and wiping my eyes with a trembling hand. I think my family has. We sat in the living room, me sandwiched between them on the sofa. Grace held my hand, her thumb rubbing soothing circles on my skin. Clara sat ramrod straight, her arms crossed, listening. I told them everything. I started with the birthday, the coldness, the uneaten cake. I showed them the flyer, David's handwriting a brutal betrayal. And then, my voice trembling, I told them about the ledger. When I finished, the room was silent except for the ticking of Harold's clock. Grace was the first to speak, her eyes swimming with tears. "Oh, my dear Ruthie," she whispered, her voice thick. "My dear, dear girl, all that love, all that giving." Clara, however, was a thundercloud. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "I knew it," she spat. "I've seen it coming for years. That Sandra has the moral compass of a used car salesman, and she's raised those children to be little more than entitled vultures. And David." She shook her head, her lips a thin white line. David has forgotten the people who built him. Clara, please, Grace said softly. This is hard enough. No, Grace, Clara snapped, turning her fiery gaze on me. This is exactly what Ruth needs to hear. She's been sleepwalking through this for a decade. They've been picking her clean, and she's been smiling and baking them cakes while they do it. It's time to wake up, Ruth. It's time to get angry. But what if I'm wrong? I pleaded, the last vestiges of my denial clinging on. What if I'm just a lonely old woman reading too much into things? Clara leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine. Did you or did you not just show us a flyer for a retirement home your son slipped under a plate at your own birthday party? Did you or did you not just show us a ledger detailing hundreds of thousands of dollars you've poured into their bottomless pit of entitlement? This isn't a misunderstanding, Ruth. This is a coup. They're staging a takeover. Grace began to cry quietly. But David, he's her son. Her little boy. He can't mean to be so cruel. That's the problem, Grace, Clara said, her voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. He doesn't see it as cruelty. He sees it as practicality. He sees his mother as a sentimental old woman sitting on an asset. He's not your little boy anymore, Ruth. He's a man with a family of his own, and he's decided that your usefulness has run its course. Now, it's time to cash you in. Her words were like physical blows, each one, landing on a fresh bruise, but they also had the strange effect of solidifying something inside me. Clara's brutal honesty was a cold compress on the fever of my confusion. What do I do? I asked, my voice small. You fight, Clara said without hesitation. You take that ledger and you lock it away. You change the subject when they bring up money. You tell them this house is your home, and you have no intention of leaving it until you're carried out in a box. You make it clear that you are not an asset to be managed. Grace squeezed my hand. Or, you could talk to him, Ruthie, mother to son, heart to heart. Maybe he doesn't realize how much he's hurting you. Maybe Sandra is pushing him. There must be some love left there, underneath it all. Love? Clara scoffed. Grace, you live in a world of rainbows and knitting patterns. This isn't about love. This is about greed. And you can't reason with greed. You can only stand up to it. I looked from one to the other. Grace's path was one of compassion, of faith in the fundamental goodness of her son. It was the path my heart wanted to take. But Clara's path was one of self-preservation, of cold, hard reality. It was the path my gut told me was true. I'm so tired, I admitted, sinking back into the sofa. I'm so tired of feeling like a problem to be solved. Then stop being the problem, Clara said, not unkindly. Become the solution. The solution is you, Ruth. You, happy and whole in your own home, on your own terms. They don't get to decide when your life is over. We talked for hours. Grace made tea and found some scones she'd brought over, forcing me to eat a little. Clara paced the room, laying out a battle plan that involved lawyers, financial advisors, and cutting them off without a dime. It was overwhelming. But by the time they left, the paralyzing grief had been replaced by a simmering sense of purpose. The confusion was clearing. I was heartbroken, yes, devastated. But I was no longer blind. I walked them to the door. Grace hugged me tightly. Pray on it, Ruthie. The answer will come. Clara gave my shoulder a firm, rare squeeze. Be strong. And call me the minute they try anything. Remember, you have us. You are not alone in this. I closed the door and leaned against it, the silence of the house feeling different now. It wasn't empty, it was waiting. It was my space. My territory. I went back to the study and looked at the ledger. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one that held Harold's old pocket watch and our marriage certificate. I placed the ledger inside and closed the drawer. It was my secret, my weapon. My proof. The war for my life hadn't been declared with shouting or lawyers. It had been declared with a birthday flyer. And I was just beginning to understand that I had to fight back. But how does a grandmother fight her own grandchildren? How do you armor a heart that has spent 74 years beating for others? I didn't have the answers. But for the first time, I was willing to ask the questions. A week passed. A week of strange, suspended animation. I went through the motions of my life, gardening, grocery shopping, having tea with Grace, but my mind was a fortress, constantly scanning the horizon for the next attack. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped into my throat. Every car that slowed in front of the house felt like a threat. The attack, when it came, was not from the direction I expected. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in the garden, on my knees, wrestling with a particularly stubborn dandelion that had taken root in my rose bed. The earth was cool and damp under my hands, and for a few precious moments, I was just Ruth, the gardener, not Ruth, the betrayed grandmother. I heard a car door shut, a single, precise sound. I looked up, my hand shielding my eyes from the sunday. It wasn't David's sleek sedan or Chloe's little sports car. It was a modest, sensible hybrid, the kind of car a school teacher or a librarian would drive. And walking up my path was a woman I had never seen before. She was probably in her late 40s, with a calm, open face and kind eyes. She wore a simple linen dress and carried a leather satchel. She didn't look like a threat. She looked nice. "Mrs. Thompson?" she called out, her voice friendly. "Ruth Thompson." I got to my feet, brushing the dirt from my knees. "Yes, can I help you?" She smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm so sorry to drop by unannounced. I was hoping I could have a few moments of your time." Eleanor Vance. The name meant nothing to me. "What is this regarding?" I asked, my newly installed defenses rising. She hesitated, her smile faltering slightly. "It's a personal matter, concerning your late husband, Harold." The air left my lungs. Harold? What could this stranger possibly want with my Harold, who had been gone for 12 years? I must have looked as stunned as I felt, because she quickly added, "I promise, I mean you no distress. In fact, I think I might have some information that could be beneficial to you." My mind raced. A lawyer? A private investigator? She didn't dress like any lawyer I'd ever known. Curiosity and a fierce, protective love for my husband's memory overrode my caution. "All right," I said, my voice tight. "You'd better come in." I led her into the living room, suddenly acutely aware of the shabbiness of the furniture, the faded patterns on the rug. She didn't seem to notice. She sat gracefully on the edge of the sofa, placing her satchel beside her. "Can I offer you some tea?" I asked, the hostess in me emerging on autopilot. "No, thank you, I'm fine," she said. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the photographs on the mantelpiece, pictures of Harold and me on our wedding day, of David as a gap-toothed boy, of the family all together at a long-ago Christmas. "You have a beautiful home," she said softly. "It feels loved in." The observation was so unexpected, so perceptive, that it disarmed me completely. "Thank you," I said, sitting opposite her. "Now, please, Miss Vance, what is this about?" She took a deep breath, her kind eyes meeting mine. "Mrs. Thompson, this is going to be difficult to hear. Harold, he was my father." The world stopped. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own breathing, it all just ceased. I stared at her, sure I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Harold Thompson was my father," she repeated gently, her gaze steady and full of compassion. "My mother's name was Caroline Vance. He had a relationship with her, briefly, before he met you. It was like being hit by a truck. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of my chair. That's impossible. Harold would never. He loved me. He was the most loyal, devoted. I couldn't even finish the sentence. This was a lie. A cruel, vicious lie. I know this is a shock, Eleanor said, her voice still calm. And I am so truly sorry to be the one to tell you. My mother passed away last year. It was only when I was going through her things that I found the evidence. Letters from Harold. Pictures. A birth certificate with his name on it. He knew about me, Mrs. Thompson. He supported my mother financially for the first few years of my life. Then, when he married you, the payments stopped. I think he wanted to protect your life together. Each word was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought I'd lived. Harold. My Harold. A secret daughter? Secret payments? It was the plot of a bad television drama. Not my life. Why are you here? I whispered, my voice raw. After all this time? To hurt me? To get money? Eleanor's face fell, and she looked genuinely pained. No. Oh no, not at all. I don't want anything from you. I have a good life. I'm a music teacher. I'm married. I have 2 beautiful children. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, worn photograph. She handed it to me. It was a picture of a young Harold. He was maybe 20, leaning against a car, smiling a cocky, youthful smile I had never seen before I knew him. And standing next to him was a beautiful, dark-haired woman with Eleanor's kind eyes. On the back, in faded ink, it read, H.C., Summer of '69. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped it. It was him. It was undeniably my Harold from a time before me, a part of his life he had completely erased. I came here, Eleanor said softly, because I wanted to know you. You're my family, in a way. My mother always spoke well of Harold. She said he was a good man who found the love of his life and did the right thing by letting her go. She never blamed him, and I don't either. I wanted to see the woman he loved enough to build this life with. She gestured around the room. I wanted to see the other half of my story. I looked from the photograph to her face. I could see it now that the shock was receding enough for me to see anything. She had his chin. She had the same gentle slope to her forehead. She had his eyes. A sob escaped me, a harsh, broken sound. I wasn't just crying for the betrayal, for the shattered image of my perfect marriage. I was crying for this woman, this calm, kind woman who had lived her whole life without a father, who had come here not with anger or greed, but with a simple, heartbreaking desire for connection. And in that moment, amidst the ruins of my understanding of the past, a bizarre and powerful clarity about the present washed over me. I had spent a lifetime worshipping a ghost, building a shrine to a man I thought was perfect, and raising a son in his image. And that son, that legacy, now saw me as a financial instrument. And here, out of the blue, was a stranger, Harold's secret daughter, who saw me not as a bank account or a problem, but as a person, as family. The irony was so profound it was almost funny. I reached out and took her hand. It was warm and solid. Eleanor, I said, my voice shaking with a maelstrom of emotions. Would you like that cup of tea now? And as I went to put the kettle on, my world, which had felt so small and besieged, suddenly felt vast, complicated, and full of terrifying, unexpected possibilities. The kettle whistled, a shrill, everyday sound that felt utterly alien in the new reality I was inhabiting. I moved around the kitchen on autopilot, fetching cups, the teapot, the sugar bowl Harold had always liked. My hands were steady, but my mind was a whirlwind. Harold, a daughter. Another family, a shadow family, existing parallel to ours all these years. I carried the tray into the living room. Eleanor was still sitting on the sofa, her posture patient, her gaze fixed on the wedding photo on the mantel. She looked up as I entered, offering a small, tentative smile. "I can't imagine what you must be thinking," she said as I poured the tea. The familiar ritual was a lifeline. "I'm not sure I'm thinking anything," I admitted, my voice still unsteady. "I feel like I've walked into the wrong house, the wrong life." I handed her a cup. "You said he supported you? For a few years?" She nodded, cradling the cup in her hands. "Until he met you. The letters my mother kept. The last one was sent just a few months before your wedding date. He wrote that he was getting married, that he'd found the woman he wanted to spend his life with, and that he had to make a clean break. He enclosed a final, larger sum of money. He said it was for my education. My mother used it to put herself through nursing school. She never contacted him again. A clean break. He had chosen me. He had chosen us. The knowledge was a balm and a poison all at once. He had loved me enough to hide this, to bury this part of his past to protect our future. But he had also lied. For 45 years of marriage, he had looked me in the eye and kept a secret that could have shattered our world. Did he ever try to see you after that?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Not that I know of," Eleanor said softly. "My mother said he was a man of his word. He promised her a clean break, and he kept it. She said it was the kindest and the cruelest thing anyone had ever done for her." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Harold's decision hanging between us. He had been a good man, I still believed that. But he was also a man, flawed and complicated, who had made a choice that now, decades later, was sending ripples through my life. "Tell me about your life, Eleanor," I said, needing to anchor myself in the present. "You said you're a teacher?" Her face lit up. "A music teacher, for middle schoolers. It's chaotic and wonderful. My husband, Mark, is a carpenter. We have 2 children. Ben, he's 16, and Lily, she's 13. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. A happy, normal family, smiling on a hiking trail. They looked kind. They looked real. My throat constricted. A 16-year-old grandson. A 13-year-old granddaughter. They had Harold's blood running through their veins, just as much as David, Chloe, and Liam did. They were my family, and I had never known they existed. And you never wanted to find him, to confront him?" I asked. She put her phone away. I thought about it. Sometimes, a lot. But my mother had built a good life for us. She was happy, and I suppose I was afraid of disrupting yours. The last letter, he sounded so happy, so in love with you. I didn't want to be the ghost at the feast. "The ghost," I echoed, thinking of the digital picture frame in the hall, my own ghostly existence in my family's life. The parallels were dizzying. Just then, my own phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. It was a text from Chloe. "Hey, Nana, thinking of you. Liam and I were talking, and we'd love to take you to lunch at the Oak Room this weekend to properly celebrate your birthday. Our treat. Let us know what day works. The Oak Room, the most expensive restaurant in the city. Their treat." I felt a cold wave of nausea. A week ago, this text would have filled me with desperate, pathetic hope. Now, I saw it for what it was, a tactical maneuver. They had sensed my coldness since the birthday, and they were moving in to secure their asset. I looked from my phone to Eleanor's calm, honest face. Here was a woman who wanted nothing from me but a story, a connection. And there was my blood family, whose affection had a price tag attached to the most expensive steakhouse in town. "Everything all right?" Eleanor asked, noticing the change in my expression. I showed her the text. "My granddaughter," I said, my voice flat. "She and her brother suddenly want to take me for $100 steak." Eleanor's brow furrowed. She didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue, and I found that I wanted to tell her. The words tumbled out: the birthday, the flyer, the ledger, my conversations with Grace and Clara. I told her about the lifetime of financial support and the crushing realization that it had bought me not love, but a calculation of my net worth. When I finished, Eleanor's eyes were wide with a mixture of horror and sympathy. "Oh, Ruth, I'm so sorry. That's awful. Ironic, isn't it?" I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I spent my life worried about the wrong secret. I thought my biggest problem was getting old. I never imagined my husband had a whole other child. And I certainly never imagined that my own would see me as a line item on a balance sheet. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Eleanor reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her touch was warm, solid. "What are you going to do?" I looked at Chloe's text again. The little heart emoji seemed to mock me. I knew what Clara would say: "Ignore it, don't play their game." I knew what Grace would say: "Go, talk to them, give them a chance." But I was tired of their voices. I needed to find my own. "I'm not sure," I said slowly, the seed of an idea beginning to form in the fertile, devastated soil of my heart. "But I think I'm going to go to lunch." Eleanor looked surprised. "You are?" I met her gaze, a new, strange sense of calm settling over me. "Yes, I need to see it for myself. I need to look them in the eye and hear the sales pitch. I need to be sure." And I was thinking of the ledger, locked in my desk drawer. And I was thinking of this new woman, this unexpected niece, sitting in my living room. The board had just gotten much bigger. And for the first time, I felt like I might have a few pieces of my own to play. The oak room was everything I feared it would be. Dark wood, hushed tones, and the quiet clinking of crystal that sounded like money talking. I felt like a museum exhibit in my simple navy dress, sitting at a table that cost more than my first refrigerator. Chloe and Liam were already there, looking like they'd stepped out of a catalog for young, successful people. "Nana, you look beautiful," Chloe chirped, air-kissing my cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume. "Yeah, you clean up nice," Liam said, giving me a one-armed hug. He was already scanning the wine list, his finger pointing to a bottle that I was sure cost more than my weekly grocery bill. We made stilted small talk. They asked about my garden. I asked about their work. The conversation was a delicate dance on a floor of eggshells. I could feel them working up to something, their eyes meeting in silent signals across the table. After the waiter took our orders, steaks for them, a simple salad for me, Lena leaned forward, her expression a masterpiece of feigned concern. "So, Nana, we've been so worried about you," she began, her voice dripping with synthetic sweetness. "In that big old house, all by yourself. It can't be safe. And the upkeep. Dad says the roof is going to need replacing soon." Ah, so David was the source of the roof intelligence. The first salvo. "I managed just fine," I said, taking a sip of my water. "I have a handyman I've used for years. He's very reasonable. But you shouldn't have to manage." Liam jumped in, his tone earnest, practiced. "You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. It's your turn to be taken care of." The hypocrisy was so thick I could have cut it with their sterling silver steak knives. They wanted to take care of me right out of my home and into a one-bedroom unit at Harborview. "I am taken care of," I said evenly. "I take care of myself." Chloe's smile tightened. "Of course you do. You're so independent." But we were thinking, what if you could be free? Free of the property taxes, the maintenance, the worry. What if you could liquidate your assets and have all that money working for you, generating a steady, carefree income for the rest of your life? There it was, the word liquidate. They wanted to turn my life into cash. I'm not sure I follow, I said, playing dumb. I wanted to hear the whole pitch. I needed to hear it, to brand it onto my memory. Liam took over, leaning in like a financial advisor. It's simple, Nana. You sell the house. The market is hot right now. You'd get a fortune for it. You take that money, invest it wisely. We can help you with that, of course, and you live off the returns. You could travel. You could buy a little condo somewhere warm. You'd never have to worry about money again. And what would happen to the money, I asked slowly, when I no longer need it? When I'm gone? They exchanged another glance, a quick, greedy flash in their eyes they couldn't quite hide. Well, that's the beauty of it, Chloe said, her voice a little too bright. The principal would remain. It would be part of your estate, for your heirs. She said the word heirs with a proprietary weight. She meant themselves. The pieces snapped into place with a final, sickening click. They didn't just want the equity from the house. They wanted control of the entire sum. They wanted to invest it for me, which meant they would have access to it. They would manage it, whittle it down with fees and advice, and whatever was left would be theirs. They were trying to get their hands on my inheritance before I was even cold in the ground. I looked at their young, beautiful, avaricious faces. I saw my son in the line of Liam's jaw. I saw my own father in the shape of Chloe's eyes. They were my flesh and blood. And they were trying to financially engineer me out of my own life. My appetite vanished. The elegant room felt like a cage. It's an interesting proposal, I said, my voice dangerously calm. But I'm quite happy where I am. The house is full of memories. Of your grandfather. Of your father when he was a boy. Of you too, when you used to build forts and bake cookies with me. Those memories are worth more to me than any rate of return. A cold silence fell over the table. The mask of concern slipped from Chloe's face, replaced by a flicker of impatience. Memories don't pay the bills, Nana. And let's be realistic. You're not getting any younger. You need to think about the future. You're not getting any younger. The words hung in the air, as blunt and cruel as Clara's most brutal assessments. I looked at her, my sweet granddaughter who used to fall asleep in my lap, and I felt nothing but a vast, hollow sadness. I am thinking about the future, Chloe. I'm just not thinking about it in the same way you are. I signaled for the check. What are you doing? Liam asked, startled. We said this was our treat. I know, I said, pulling out my wallet. I placed my credit card on the little leather tray the waiter brought. But I'd rather pay for my own salad. That way, I don't owe anyone anything. The drive home was a blur. I didn't cry. I was past tears. I was in the cold, clear space beyond heartbreak. They had shown me their hand. It was all about the money. There was no love there, not anymore. It had been suffocated by greed. When I walked into my silent house, I went straight to the study. I didn't open the drawer with the ledger. Instead, I picked up the photograph of Harold and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so full of hope, so blissfully unaware of the secrets and betrayals that lay ahead. "Oh, Harold," I whispered to his smiling, frozen face. "What did we create? What did we build?" The house gave me no answer. But for the first time, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just defend myself anymore. I had to make a move of my own. They thought they were playing a game of financial chess. But they had forgotten that the queen, even an old one, is the most powerful piece on the board. And I was just beginning to learn how to play. The calm I felt after the oak room was a strange metallic thing. It wasn't peace, it was resolve. The kind of resolve that comes when you have nothing left to lose, when every soft, hopeful part of you has been calloused over by reality. I slept deeply that night for the first time in weeks, and when I woke, my mind was clear as ice. I knew what my next move had to be. It was time to stop talking to my friends and start talking to a professional. It was time to make my own reality as solid and unassailable as the lies my family were telling themselves. I called Clara first. "I'm going to see a lawyer," I said without preamble. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and then a sound of pure satisfaction. "Good, it's about time. Do you want me to come with you?" "No," I said, surprising myself with my own firmness. "This is something I need to do alone." I spent the morning getting ready. I put on my best suit, a tailored navy one I hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. I styled my hair. I looked in the mirror and saw a 74-year-old woman, yes, but one with a spine of steel. I saw Ruth Thompson, homeowner, widow, and, soon-to-be, architect of her own future. The law office of Barrett and Sons was downtown, in a glass tower that reflected the cold, blue sky. Old Mr. Barrett had handled Harold's will and our estate planning for decades. He'd retired, but his son, Michael, a man in his 50s with a kind, tired face and sharp eyes, had taken over. "Ruth," he said, rising from his desk to shake my hand. "It's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." We sat, and he waited, his hands folded on the polished wood of his desk. "Michael," I began, my voice steady, "I need to make some changes to my will, and I need to protect myself." I told him everything. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I laid it out like a business proposal, because that, I had finally understood, was what this was. I told him about the birthday, the flyer, the lunch at the Oak Room. And then I opened my bag and placed my ledger on his desk. "This," I said, "is a record of every major financial gift I have given my son and his family over the last 30 years. Michael Barrett picked up the ledger. He didn't speak as he flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the columns of dates and amounts. His expression grew graver with each turn of the page. When he finished, he closed the book gently and looked at me. "Ruth," he said softly, "this is a significant amount of money. I know, and you've never asked for any of it to be repaid. There were no formal agreements?" "No. They were gifts, given out of love." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "The law is very clear. A gift is a gift. You have no legal recourse to get any of this back. But," he paused, his gaze sharpening, "this document is not without its uses. It establishes a pattern of extreme generosity on your part. In any future contestation of your will, it could be used to demonstrate that David has, in many ways, already received a substantial portion of his inheritance." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. "So, it means something." "It means a great deal," he said. "Now, you said you wanted to change your will. What did you have in mind?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The point of no return. "I want to disinherit my son, David, and his children, Chloe and Liam." Michael didn't flinch. He was a professional. He simply nodded. "You have every right to do that. The bulk of your estate would then go to—" This was the other part of my plan. The part that had begun to form when Eleanor Vance sat in my living room. "I have other family," I said. "A woman named Eleanor Vance. She is Harold's biological daughter from a relationship prior to our marriage." This time, Michael did look surprised. "I see. Harold never mentioned." "No," I said, a sad smile touching my lips. "He didn't, but she exists, and she has 2 children." My grandchildren, in blood, if not in name. I want my estate divided between them. The house, my savings, everything. Michael made a note. We will need to establish paternity, of course, DNA testing for Eleanor. But if it holds, she has a legitimate claim. Are you sure this is what you want, Ruth? This is a final decision. It will cause immense pain. I'm already in immense pain, Michael, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The pain of being valued for my wallet and not my heart. This will be a different kind of pain. A surgical one, and it will be on my terms. We spent the next 2 hours going over the details. He drew up a new will, leaving $100 to David for the purchase of a commemorative item and the rest of my entire estate to Eleanor Vance and her children. It was brutal. It was final, but I wasn't done. I also want to set up a trust, I said. A charitable trust. I want to move a large portion of my liquid assets into it now. I want to start giving it away. Michael looked at me, a new respect in his eyes. To what cause? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Something that helps people who aren't expecting it. Something that creates joy, not entitlement. I thought of the uneaten birthday cake. Maybe a program that provides birthday parties for foster children, or scholarships for adult learners. I'll decide later. The point is, I want to see my money do some good while I'm still alive to see it. I don't want it to just sit there, waiting for vultures to pick it clean. By the time I left Michael Barrett's office, I had signed a new will and set in motion the creation of the Harold and Ruth Thompson Charitable Trust. The paperwork was underway. The DNA test kit for Eleanor was ordered. I walked out of the cold glass tower and into the afternoon. Sunday I felt lighter. The weight of the ledger, the weight of my family's expectations, was gone. I had taken my power back. I had rewritten the ending. They thought they were waiting for an inheritance. What they didn't know was that I was already in the process of giving it all away. Telling Eleanor about the DNA test was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I invited her back to the house, this time for lunch. I made a quiche, Harold's favorite, and a simple green salad. It felt important to be on my own turf, surrounded by the life Harold and I had built, while I proposed dismantling a part of its legacy. She arrived looking slightly apprehensive, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers. For your kitchen table, she said, her smile warm but unsure. They're beautiful, thank you, Eleanor. I took them, their bright, cheerful faces a stark contrast to the solemn conversation we were about to have. Lunch is ready. Let's sit. We ate in the dining room, the same room where my birthday had unraveled. The digital frame was gone. I'd put it in a closet, unable to bear its silent, shifting accusations. We made small talk about her children, about my garden, but the unspoken question hung in the air between us. Finally, over slices of warm apple pie. I couldn't stall any longer. Eleanor, I began, setting my fork down. I've done something rather drastic, and it involves you. Her face grew still. Involves me? I took a deep breath. I've changed my will. I've left my entire estate to you and your children. The color drained from her face. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. For a long moment, she was utterly silent. Then, she shook her head, a quick, frantic motion. No, Ruth, no. That's not why I came here. I don't want your money. I told you that. I know you did, I said gently, reaching across the table to cover her hand. And I believe you. That's precisely why I'm doing it. You didn't ask for anything. You came looking for a story, for a connection. My blood family, they only come looking for a check. But, David, your grandchildren, she stammered, her eyes wide with horror. You can't disinherit your own son, the scandal, the pain. The pain is already there, Eleanor, I said, my voice firm. They are systematically breaking my heart. They see me as a burden and an asset. You see me as a person, as a link to your father. That is worth more to me than you can possibly imagine. Tears welled in her eyes. I can't accept this. It feels wrong. It feels like I'm stealing from them. You're not stealing anything, I said firmly. I am giving it. There's a world of difference. I am choosing to give my legacy to someone who values it for the history it represents, not for the price it can fetch. I paused, choosing my words carefully. There is, however, one condition. She looked at me wary now. What condition? The lawyer needs proof, legal, incontrovertible proof that you are Harold's daughter. We need to do a DNA test. I pulled the small, sterile box from the law firm out of my bag and placed it on the table between us. It looked so clinical, so cold, sitting next to our dessert plates. Eleanor stared at it as if it were a snake. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. A DNA test, she whispered. To prove I'm his. I don't need proof, Eleanor, I said softly. I can see him in you, in your smile, in the way you hold your hands. But the law is not sentimental. It needs data. She was silent for a long time, looking from the test kit to my face, then around the room at the ghost of the life her father had lived without her. All my life, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I wondered what he was like. My mother loved him, but she was also sad. There was always a shadow. And now, to have it confirmed like this, to have it be about legal documents and wills. She shook her head. It makes it feel so transactional. So cold. I understand, I said, and I did. This was forcing her to formalize a relationship that had existed only in whispers and old photographs. It was making a fact out of a feeling. What if I say no? She asked, her gaze challenging me. Then the will stands, but it could be contested. I said honestly. David would fight it. He would hire lawyers and drag you through the mud. He would call you a fraud, a gold digger. With the DNA, it's a closed case. He can't touch it, or you. She absorbed this, the practical reality of the situation dawning on her. This wasn't just about inheritance, it was about protection. My protection of her, and her protection from the storm my biological family would inevitably unleash. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, with a resolve that reminded me so much of Harold it made my heart ache, she picked up the box. All right, she said, her voice steady now. Let's do it. The process was simple, absurdly so for the weight it carried. A quick swab inside her cheek, sealed in a vial. A matching swab from me to establish the familial link. We did it right there at the dining table, two women connected by a man and a secret, binding our futures together with a gesture that was part science, part sacrament. When it was done, I placed the vials back in the box. I'll messenger this to the lawyer today. Eleanor nodded, looking drained. What happens now? Now, I said, gathering the plates, we wait. And we live our lives. You go back to your family, to your students, and I have some giving to do. She helped me clear the table, a simple domestic act that felt profoundly significant. We were family now, in a way that was chosen, tested, and legally documented. It was messy and complicated, and born from pain, but it was real. As she was leaving, she turned to me on the porch. Thank you, Ruth, she said. Not for the money, for including me, for seeing me. Thank you, Eleanor, I replied, my own eyes filling with tears. For seeing me, too. I watched her drive away, the DNA test kit sitting on my hall table like a promise and a threat. The wheels were in motion, there was no going back. The foundation of the future had been poured, and its primary ingredient was not love or even money, but the unassailable, double helix truth. With the legal machinery grinding away in the background, a strange sense of liberation settled over me. The dread was gone. The uncertainty was replaced by a clear, if painful, path forward. I had made my decision, and now I was free to act. And my first act would be one of pure, unadulterated giving. The Harold and Ruth Thompson Charitable Trust was officially established. Michael Barrett had worked swiftly. A substantial portion of my savings money that had been sitting in CDs and money market accounts, waiting for a rainy day or, more likely, for David to eventually inherit it, was now under the control of the trust. I was the sole trustee. I could direct the funds as I saw fit. The power of it was intoxicating. This was my money, earned from a lifetime of work and sacrifice with Harold, and I was going to use it to sprinkle a little bit of grace into the world. A direct rebuttal to the avarice festering in my own family. But where to start? I thought about what Clara had said about fighting greed. This was my counteroffensive. Not with lawyers and wills, but with kindness. I decided my first gift would be for Grace. Sweet, gentle Grace, who had spent her life caring for others. She'd been a nurse for 40 years, and now she volunteered at the local library, reading to children. She lived in a small, tidy bungalow she'd shared with her late husband, and I knew she worried about the roof, about the rising property taxes. She never complained, but I saw the anxiety in her eyes sometimes. I called Michael Barrett. "I want to make a gift," I said. "A personal one, from me, not from the trust. I want to pay off my friend Grace's mortgage." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ruth, that's incredibly generous. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I didn't tell Grace. I had Michael handle it directly with her bank. I wanted it to be a complete surprise, a burden lifted without her ever having to ask or thank me. That was the whole point. The day the transaction cleared, I went over to her house under the pretext of needing help with a knitting pattern. She was in her sunny kitchen, her needles clicking away, when the phone rang. She answered it, her face a picture of polite confusion. "Yes, this is she." "I'm sorry? You're from the bank? What do you mean, paid in full? There must be some mistake." I sat quietly, watching her. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to a dawning, tremulous joy. Her eyes filled with tears, and her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, my goodness," she whispered into the phone. Are you certain?" Thank you so much." She hung up the phone and words, stared at it, then at me. The tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling, a radiant, disbelieving smile. "Ruthie," she breathed. "The bank, they said my mortgage. It's been paid off, in full. They said it was an anonymous donor." I couldn't keep the smile from my own face. "Well," I said softly, "it seems you have a guardian angel." Her eyes narrowed, and she looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the lack of surprise on my face. She saw the peace that had settled there in recent days. "It was you," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "Oh, Ruthie, why? How?" "Because you are my family, Grace," I said, my own eyes stinging. "You and Clara. You've been my true family, and family takes care of each other. Not because they want something in return, but because they can." She came around the table and pulled me into a bone-crushing hug, sobbing into my shoulder. I don't know what to say. I can't believe it, the relief. I've been so worried. "You don't have to worry anymore," I said, holding her tight. "Not about that." We cried together, two old women in a sunny kitchen, one whose burden had been lifted and one who had finally learned the joy of lifting it. When Clara found out, her reaction was, predictably, different. She came over that evening, her arms crossed, a smirk on her face. "So," she said, without preamble, "I hear you've gone full Robin Hood." I laughed. "Something like that." She nodded, a glint of approval in her sharp eyes. "Good, hit them where it hurts. In their sense of entitlement. They think every dollar you have is already theirs. Spending it on someone else is the ultimate rebellion." "It's not about rebellion, Clara," I said, though I knew she was partly right. "It's about redemption. Redeeming the meaning of the money. Harold and I worked hard for that money. It was meant to build a legacy of love. I'm just making sure that's what it does." Clara poured herself a glass of iced tea. "Well, just be ready. When word gets out, and it will, the vultures are going to start circling in earnest. You've just shown them you're willing to give their inheritance away to strangers." "Grace is not a stranger," I said firmly. "To them, she is," Clara countered. "Anyone who isn't them is a stranger. You've fired the first shot across their bow, whether you meant to or not." She was right, of course. My act of pure generosity would be seen by my family as an act of war. But for the first time, the thought didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with a quiet, steady resolve. Let them come. Let them circle. I had just discovered I had wings. And I was only just beginning to learn how to fly. Clara's prediction came true faster than I could have imagined. The world of small towns and tight-knit circles is a sieve, and money is the water that always finds a way through. It was David who called, his voice a low, tense wire of controlled fury. "Mom, we need to talk." I was in the garden, harvesting the last of the summer tomatoes. The sun was warm on my back. "About what, David?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped, the control in his voice fraying. "I just had a very interesting conversation with Ted from the bank. He mentioned that there was a significant transfer from your accounts recently. A transfer to Grace Henderson's mortgage account." So, Ted, the bank manager, a man who had watched David grow up, had decided a little gossip was more important than client confidentiality. I felt a flare of anger, but it was quickly doused by a wave of exhaustion. This was inevitable. "What I do with my money is my business, David," I said, my voice calm. "Your money?" he exploded. "Your money? Mom, that's our inheritance. That's mine and the kids' future. And you're just throwing it away on that woman. Her name is Grace." I said, my own anger rising now. "She has been a better daughter to me in the last month than you have in the last decade. She is my family." "We are your family," he shouted. "Your blood. How could you do this? Are you losing your mind? Is this some kind of senility?" There it was, the nuclear option. The moment an entitled child accuses a parent of being unfit, of no longer being in command of their faculties, it's the first step toward guardianship, toward taking control. My own son was suggesting I was crazy because I'd been kind to a friend. The last tiny, fragile thread of hope I'd been clinging to, the hope that somewhere underneath the greed my little boy still existed, snapped. "I have never been clearer in my mind, David," I said, my voice like ice. "I am seeing things with a clarity that has been a long time coming, and what I see is that my money has become more important to you than I am." "That's not true," he protested, but the lie was pathetic. "We're just worried about you. We're worried you're being taken advantage of. First, this mysterious Eleanor person you've been seen with, and now you're giving away tens of thousands of dollars to Grace? It doesn't make sense." So they were watching me. They knew about Eleanor. The surveillance had begun. "It makes perfect sense to me," I said. "It makes more sense than buying a digital picture frame to show me a life I'm not part of. It makes more sense than slipping a retirement home flyer under a plate at my birthday party." It makes more sense than a lunch at the Oak Room where my grandchildren try to convince me to liquidate my life. The line was silent. I had shocked him with my bluntness. I had never spoken to him like this before. "Mom," he began, his tone shifting to one of wounded pleading. "Those things. We were just trying to help. We love you." "No, David," I said, the sadness so profound it was a physical ache in my chest. "You love what I represent, a payday. And I am here to tell you that payday is over." I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was diamond hard. The battle lines were now drawn in the open. The covert manipulation was over. It was war. The phone rang again immediately. And again, I let it go to voicemail. Then the texts started. "Chloe, Nana, what is Dad talking about? Are you okay?" Liam, "Seriously, Nana, giving our money to that old lady? What the fuck?" David, "Mom, call me back. We need to discuss this like adults." "We're coming over." The last one made my blood run cold. "We're coming over." A confrontation. They would descend on me, all of them, and try to bully me, to gaslight me, to convince me I was a foolish old woman. I couldn't face that. Not alone. I picked up the phone and called the two people I knew would come without question. "Clara," I said when she answered. "They know. They're on their way." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said, and the line went dead. I called Grace next. She was still crying on and off from the shock of her gift. "Grace, I need you. They're coming." "Oh, dear Lord," she whispered. "I'm on my way, Ruthie. Don't you open that door until I get there." I went and locked the front door. Then I went to the back door and locked it too. I stood in the middle of my living room, my heart pounding, waiting for my reinforcements. I felt like I was preparing for a siege, and in a way, I was. They were coming to lay siege to my freedom, my mind, and my bank account. But they were about to find out that this old fortress was better defended than they thought. Clara arrived first, her face set in grim lines. Grace came minutes later, her eyes wide with fear, but her chin held high. We were the three musketeers of the geriatric set, ready to defend one of our own. We didn't have to wait long. I saw David's car screech to a halt outside, followed by Chloe's. 4 doors slammed in quick succession. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Then the pounding started. "Mom!" David's voice, angry and demanding. "Open this door. We know you're in there." I looked at Clara and Grace. Clara gave a sharp, single nod. Grace reached for my hand and squeezed it. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door and turned the lock. It was time to face my family. I opened the door to a wall of fury. David stood front and center, his face flushed, his usually impeccable hair disheveled. Sandra was just behind him, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Chloe and Liam flanked them, looking like angry, beautiful statues. Their eyes swept past me and landed on Clara and Grace, who had positioned themselves on either side of me like sentinels. The sight of them seemed to inflame David even more. "What are they doing here?" he demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. "They are my guests," I said, my voice remarkably steady. "This is my home. I decide who is here." "We need to talk, Mom, alone." His gaze was hard, implacable. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of them," I replied. "They know everything." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Fine." He pushed past me into the living room, the rest of his family trailing in his wake. They didn't sit. They stood, a united, hostile front. "What is this about giving Grace $50,000? David began, his voice booming in the quiet room. Grace flinched. Clara put a steadying hand on her arm. It was 70, actually, I said calmly. And it was a gift. A gift? Sandra spluttered, her composure breaking. Ruth, that's insane. That's our children's future. It was my money, Sandra, I said, looking directly at her. Earned by me and Harold, and I chose to give it to my friend. It is no more insane than you spending $20,000 on a watch for Liam, which I saw in one of your pictures. Liam had the decency to look momentarily ashamed. That's different, Chloe cried, her voice shrill. He's your grandson. He's family. She's just some old lady you knit with. Watch your tone, girl, Clara said, her voice low and dangerous. You're speaking about a woman with more class in her little finger than you have in your entire body. Stay out of this, Clara, David snarled. This is a family matter. I am family, Clara shot back. A hell of a lot more than you're acting like right now. Mom, David said, turning his furious attention back to me, his tone shifting to one of strained reason. We are concerned. Deeply concerned. First, this massive, irresponsible gift. And we know you've been spending time with some woman named Eleanor. Who is she? What does she want from you? Eleanor is Harold's daughter, I said. The silence that fell was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. They stared at me, their faces blank with incomprehension. What did you say? David whispered. Harold had a child before he met me. Her name is Eleanor Vance. She is your half-sister. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. That's a lie, Sandra shrieked. A filthy lie. Harold would never. You're making this up, Chloe yelled. You're senile. She's brainwashed you. But David just stood there, his face pale, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. He was putting the pieces together, the money, the new will I must have made, this mysterious woman. He was a smart man. He saw the cliff edge we were standing on. What have you done, Mom? He asked, his voice hollow. What have you done? I have ensured that my legacy goes to people who value it, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. To people who see me as a person, not a portfolio. You've changed your will, he stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, you've left our money to this stranger. Liam finally found his voice, his face contorted with rage. She is not a stranger, she is your aunt. And yes, I have. The room erupted. Sandra was crying now, great, heaving sobs of outrage. Chloe was spitting insults, calling me a traitor, a fool. Liam was pacing, running his hands through his hair. Only David was still, a statue of betrayed fury. You can't do this, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I will fight this. I will get lawyers. I will have you declared incompetent. I will drag that woman through every court in this state. You will not get away with this. His words were meant to terrify me, and a week ago they would have, but now they just sounded pathetic. The threat of a bully who had just lost his power. You can try, David, I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. But I have an excellent lawyer, and I have all my faculties. And I have this. I walked to my desk, unlocked the drawer, and pulled out the ledger. I held it up. This is a record of every dollar your father and I ever gave you. It totals more than the current value of this house. In the eyes of any court, you have already received your inheritance. You've just spent it. He stared at the ledger as if it were a venomous snake. The rest of the family fell silent, staring at the simple notebook that held the evidence of their lifelong greed. Now, I said, my voice ringing with a finality that surprised even me. I want you all to leave my home. You are not welcome here until you can see me as your mother and grandmother, and not as your personal ATM. For a long moment, no one moved. They just stared at me, at this new version of Ruth, who fought back, who had secrets of her own, who was no longer a passive participant in her own life. Then, with a sound of pure disgust. David turned on his heel. "Come on," he barked at his family. "She's made her choice." They filed out, a defeated, furious army. Sandra was still sobbing. Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred. Liam looked stunned. David didn't look back. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, my entire body trembling with adrenaline and grief. Grace was crying softly. Clara was smiling a fierce, triumphant smile. "You did it, Ruth," Clara said. "You stood your ground. You showed them you're not afraid." "I am afraid," I whispered, the strength draining out of me. "I'm terrified. I've just lost my family." "No," Grace said, coming to my side and putting her arm around me. "You haven't lost them, Ruthie. You've just finally seen them for who they are. And now you're free to find your real family." I looked at my two friends, these women who had stood with me in the breach. They were my family. And Eleanor, with her quiet strength and her unexpected connection, was my family. The DNA test would prove it, but I didn't need it to. I already knew. The siege was over. The walls were still standing. And for the first time, I was the one in control of the gate. The days after the confrontation were eerily quiet. The phone didn't ring. No cars slowed in front of the house. It was as if my family had simply vanished from the face of the earth, leaving a David-shaped silence in their wake. I knew it wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. They were regrouping, consulting lawyers, planning their next move. Clara assured me of this daily. "Don't you dare let your guard down, Ruth," she'd say over the phone, her voice a constant, grim reminder. "They're licking their wounds and sharpening their knives. The incompetency claim is next. You mark my words." But in the strange, suspended silence, a new life began to take root around me. It was a quieter life, a smaller one, but it was authentic. Eleanor and I began to see each other regularly. Our meetings were no longer fraught with the tension of her revelation or the weight of my will. We had moved into a comfortable, gentle friendship. She came over and helped me in the garden, her hands, so like Harold's, deftly tying up the tomato plants. I taught her how to make his favorite peach cobbler. We were two women, bound by the same ghost, building a bridge across the chasm he had left. One Saturday, she brought her children, Ben and Lily. I was nervous. What would they think of this sudden, ancient great-aunt who had appeared out of nowhere? But they were wonderful. Ben, 16 and lanky, with Harold's thoughtful eyes, was shy but polite. He saw my old telescope in the corner and his face lit up. "You're into astronomy?" he asked, and we spent 20 minutes talking about constellations. Lily, 13 and bursting with creative energy, found the box of my old fabric scraps. "Can I have these?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I make collages." I showed her the quilt I was working on, and she sat with me for an hour, her small hands carefully arranging pieces of cloth into a vibrant, chaotic pattern that was so full of life it made my heart ache. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't look at my furniture and calculate its worth. They were just present. They filled the house with a noise that wasn't hostile or demanding, but alive and curious. When they left, Lily hugged me spontaneously. "Bye, Great Aunt Ruth," she said, and the title, so unexpected, felt like a blessing. This I thought as I watched their car drive away. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Meanwhile, the Harold and Ruth Thompson Charitable Trust was becoming my great joy. With Michael Barrett's help, I made my first official disbursement, a donation to the local library to fund its summer reading program for underprivileged children. I didn't do it anonymously this time. I wanted my name on it, mine and Harold's. I wanted our legacy to be this: stories for children, the spark of imagination. I received a lovely, handwritten thank you note. From the head librarian. I framed it and put it on my desk. It meant more to me than any birthday card from my grandkids ever had. I was living again. I was gardening, I was quilting, I was having tea with Grace and strategizing with Clara. I was getting to know my new great-niece and nephew. I was giving away money and feeling it heal some small, broken part of the world, and in doing so, healing a broken part of me. But the shadow of the coming storm was always there. Clara's warnings were a constant drumbeat in the background. They're going to file for guardianship, she predicted. They'll get a doctor to say you're confused, that you're being manipulated. They'll try to take control. I tried not to think about it. I focused on my new life, my chosen family. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was a young woman. I set up an easel in the sunroom and made messy, joyful, terrible paintings of my flowers. It didn't matter that they were bad. What mattered was that I was creating, not just waiting. One evening, Eleanor stayed for dinner. We were sitting on the porch, watching the fireflies blink in the twilight, when she said, "The results should be back any day now." I knew what she meant, the DNA test, the final scientific proof. "Are you nervous?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "A little. It's silly, I know it's him. But having it in writing, it makes it so official. It closes the door on the mystery. And opens a new one," I said. She smiled. "Yes. A better one." We sat in comfortable silence. The air was warm, filled with the scent of honeysuckle. It was a perfect, peaceful moment. I felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude for this woman, for this second chance at family that had come to me in my 8th decade. The peace was shattered by the headlights of a car turning into my driveway. It wasn't Eleanor's sensible hybrid. It was a dark, sleek sedan I didn't recognize. My heart plummeted. The calm was over. A man in a suit got out. He carried a thick, legal-sized envelope. Clara's words echoed in my head. "They're going to file for guardianship." He walked up the path, his steps crisp and official. "Ruth Thompson?" he asked, his voice impersonal. "Yes," I said, standing up, my knees feeling weak. He held out the envelope. "You've been served." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing on my own porch, the thick, heavy envelope in my hand. The object felt toxic, a container of pure malice. Eleanor came to stand beside me, her face pale. "What is it?" I didn't need to open it. I knew. The war for my life had just entered a new, more brutal phase. They weren't just trying to take my money anymore. They were trying to take my freedom. I took a deep breath of the honeysuckle-scented air. The calm was over. The storm was here, and I was ready. My hands didn't tremble as I opened the envelope. The fear had been burned away, replaced by a cold, clear fury. I unfolded the thick sheaf of papers. The words at the top were in stark, black letters, "Petition for appointment of guardian." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Ruth, no." I skimmed the document, my eyes catching the key phrases, each one a fresh betrayal. The proposed ward, Ruth Thompson, is suffering from a progressive cognitive decline. Exhibits poor judgment and is susceptible to undue influence. Has made erratic and irresponsible financial decisions, including gifting large sums to non-relatives. Is in contact with unknown individuals who may be exploiting her for financial gain. Poses a danger to herself and her financial estate. It was signed by my son, David Thompson, the petitioner. He was asking the court to declare me incompetent, to strip me of the right to manage my own finances, to make my own medical decisions, to live in my own home. He was asking for control. Total control. The rest of the document was a list of exhibits, bank statements showing the gift to Grace, a private investigator's report detailing my meetings with Eleanor, a sworn statement from Sandra about my increasing paranoia and confusion, and a supporting letter from a doctor. Alistair Finch, a geriatric psychiatrist I had never met, who, based on interviews with the family, had formed the opinion that I was likely in the early stages of dementia. They had built a case. A flimsy, malicious, hateful case, but a case nonetheless. They had doctors and private investigators and lawyers. They had my own family lined up against me. I felt Eleanor's arm around my shoulders. "This is monstrous," she whispered, her voice shaking with anger. "How could he do this?" "He's scared," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "He's scared that he's losing his meal ticket. And when scared, greedy people get dangerous." I walked inside, the papers clutched in my hand. I went to the phone and called Clara. "They did it," I said when she answered. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "The guardianship, yes. I'll be right over." Next, I called Michael Barrett. It was after hours, but he answered his cell. "Ruth, I've been served, Michael. David has filed for guardianship." He was silent for a moment. "All right," he said, his voice all business. "Don't panic. This is a common tactic. A nasty one, but common. We will fight it, and we will win. Do not speak to David or anyone in his family. Do not speak to any doctor they send to you. I will be in my office first thing in the morning. We will prepare our response." When I hung up, I felt a sliver of reassurance. I had a general. I had an army. It was a small army, but it was fierce. Clara arrived within minutes, her face a thundercloud. She read the petition, her lips moving silently, her eyes blazing. When she finished, she slammed the papers down on the coffee table. "That little bastard," she hissed. "That ungrateful, greedy little bastard. Using a doctor to do his dirty work. I'll have his license." "We have to stay focused, Clara," I said, the strange calm still holding me. "Michael says we will win." "Damn right we will," Clara said. "We'll bury them. We have the ledger. We have the new will. We have Eleanor. We have the truth." But the truth, I was learning, was a fragile thing in a courtroom. It could be twisted, manipulated, buried under lies and professional opinions bought and paid for. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I met with Michael Barrett for hours. We assembled our own evidence. The ledger was entered as Exhibit A. We had Grace write an affidavit about our lifelong friendship and her shock at the gift, testifying to my sound mind and generous heart. We had Clara write one, attesting to my mental acuity and her decades of knowing me as a sharp, capable woman. And we had our secret weapon, the DNA test results. They arrived by courier to Michael's office. He called me, his voice triumphant. "It's a match, Ruth. 99.97% probability of relatedness. Eleanor is Harold's daughter." This completely undermines their claim of unknown individuals exploiting you. She is family. You were reuniting with a long-lost relative. It was a victory, a crucial one. But the battle was just beginning. The first court hearing was a preliminary one, to determine if the petition had enough merit to proceed. I dressed carefully again, in my navy suit. My army came with me. Clara, Grace, and now Eleanor. We walked into the courthouse together, a phalanx of gray-haired and determined women. David was there with his lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man in a $1,000 suit. Sandra, Chloe, and Liam were in the front row, their faces set in identical masks of aggrieved concern. They didn't look at me. The judge, a weary-looking woman with intelligent eyes, listened as David's lawyer laid out his case. He spoke of my decline, my irresponsible gifting, my isolation from my family, and my association with a mysterious woman. Then it was Michael's turn. He was calm, methodical. He submitted the DNA results. Your Honor, the mysterious woman is Eleanor Vance, my client's sister-in-law. This is not exploitation, it is family reconciliation. He submitted the affidavits from Grace and Clara. These longtime friends attest to Mrs. Thompson's sound mind and generous nature. Then he held up the ledger. And this, Your Honor, is a record of the millions of dollars my client has given to her son over his lifetime. The recent gift to Miss Henderson, which the petitioner finds so irresponsible, is a fraction of what he himself has received. This petition is not about protecting Ruth Thompson. It is about punishing her for no longer funding her son's lifestyle. The judge looked from the ledger to David, her expression unreadable. David's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, that document is irrelevant. A parent's love cannot be quantified in dollars and cents. It would seem, the judge said dryly, that the petitioner has been quite happy to quantify it for decades. She looked at David. Mr. Thompson, is this ledger accurate? David looked like a trapped animal. He glanced at his lawyer, then back at the judge. My mother has always been generous, he stammered. That's not what I asked, the judge said, her voice sharp. Is this record accurate? There was a long, painful silence. Substantially, yes, he finally whispered. The judge nodded. She made a note. I am dismissing the petition for guardianship, she said. There is no evidence here of cognitive decline. What I see is a family dispute over money. This court is not the venue for that. She banged her gavel. It was over. We had won. I felt a wave of relief so powerful. I thought I might faint. Clara squeezed my arm, her face triumphant. Grace was crying tears of joy. But as we walked out of the courtroom, David brushed past me, his face a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. This isn't over, Mom, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. I will get what's mine. I will destroy you first. He stalked away, his family trailing behind him. The victory felt hollow suddenly. I had won the battle, but the war was still raging. And my enemy was my own son. Winning in court should have felt like a decisive victory. It should have been the end. But with family, wars are never that clean. They don't end with a gavel, they just move to a new, dirtier battlefield. The smear campaign started subtly. A rumor here, a whispered comment there. I'd be at the grocery store and notice an old neighbor quickly look away. I'd go to my book club and feel the conversation stutter to a halt when I walked in. Then the posts started on social media. Chloe, who had thousands of followers, began a campaign of passive-aggressive victimhood. It's so hard when family doesn't feel like family anymore. Accompanied by a picture of her looking sad and beautiful. Greed changes people. Remember to hold your loved ones close. Praying for those who are being manipulated and can't see it. She never used my name, but everyone in our circle knew. The comments were a cesspool of support for her. You're so strong, Chloe. I'm so sorry your grandma is doing this to you. Some people just get mean when they get old. Liam joined in, posting memes about betrayal and family sticks together. David, more circumspect, shared articles about elder financial abuse and the importance of staying vigilant. They were painting a picture for the world. Poor David and his beautiful family, being cruelly rejected and financially plundered by their senile, manipulated grandmother. The worst was when Sandra cornered Grace after church. It's such a shame, Grace, she said, her voice syrupy with false concern, loud enough for the entire congregation to hear. We know you're not a bad person. We know Ruth has always been suggestible, but to take advantage of an old woman's confusion like that. For money. Well, I'll pray for you. Grace came to my house afterward, trembling and in tears. She called me a gold digger, Ruthie, in front of everyone. I've never been so humiliated in my life. I felt a rage so pure it was almost beautiful. They were attacking my friends now. They were trying to isolate me, to make me a pariah so that when they made their next move, no one would stand with me. Clara, of course, was incandescent. We'll sue them for slander. I'll go to that little brat Chloe's workplace and tell her boss what a piece of work she is. No, Clara, I said, though the temptation was strong. That's what they want. They want a messy, public fight. They want to drag us into the mud. We won't go. Then what do? Grace asked, wiping her eyes. We can't just let them destroy our reputations. I thought about it. I thought about the quiet power of the trust, of the library donation. I thought about the joy of giving without expectation. We kill them with kindness, I said. Clara snorted. Kindness? Ruth, they're piranhas. Kindness is just chum in the water. No, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Not kindness to them, kindness to everyone else. I went to see Michael Barrett. I want to make another donation from the trust. A big one. And I want it to be very, very public. I decided on the local children's hospital. They had a wing named after Harold's parents. It was where David had had his tonsils out. It was perfect. The donation was substantial enough to get a press release. The hospital was thrilled. They asked if I would do a small photo op, presenting the check. I agreed. I wore my Navy suit. I stood with the hospital director, a giant mock-up of the check in my hands. A reporter from the local paper was there, and a photographer. The next day, my picture was on the front page of the local section. The headline read, Local Widow's Generous Gift to Children's Hospital. The article mentioned the Harold and Ruth Thompson Charitable Trust. It mentioned my late husband. It painted a picture of a philanthropic, community-minded woman. It was the perfect antidote to the poison my family was spreading. The comments on the online version of the article were overwhelmingly positive. What a wonderful lady. This is what true legacy looks like. So refreshing to see good news. I shared the article on my own sparse social media page. Eleanor shared it. Grace and Clara shared it. Our small army flooded the zone with light, pushing back the darkness of my family's smear campaign. A few days later, I was at the hardware store, buying potting soil. An older man I knew vaguely from the garden club came up to me. Saw your picture in the paper, Ruth, he said, smiling. Fine thing you're doing. Fine thing. Don't you listen to any of the nonsense those kids of yours are spreading. Everyone knows what they're about. I thanked him, my eyes stinging with grateful tears. The tide was turning. My family's lies were like weeds, choking and insidious. But my actions, my very public, very generous actions, were like sunlight. And sunlight, as any gardener knows, is the best disinfectant. They had tried to paint me as a confused, greedy old woman. So I had painted myself as a generous, clear-eyed philanthropist. I had rewritten the narrative. I hadn't realized it at the time, but I had just fought the most important battle of the war, the battle for public opinion, and I had won. The smear campaign didn't stop, but it lost its power. People saw it for what it was, the bitter whining of entitled children who had been cut off. They had tried to destroy my name, and in doing so, they had only succeeded in building me a better one. The public donation to the children's hospital was a turning point. The whispers in town didn't just stop, they reversed direction. Now, when people saw David or Sandra at the country club, they were met with cool nods or outright avoidance. The community had chosen its side, and it had chosen the generous grandmother over the grasping, litigious son. The silence from my family became absolute. It was no longer a tactical silence, it was the silence of defeat. They had played their best cards, the emotional manipulation, the legal assault, the character assassination, and I had beaten them all. I should have felt triumphant. And a part of me, the part that was Clara's disciple, did. But the larger part of me, the mother and grandmother, felt only a profound, bone-deep sorrow. I had wanted to protect myself, to teach them a lesson, but I had never wanted to destroy them. Yet, in standing my ground, that's exactly what I seemed to have done. It was Eleanor who brought me the news. She came over one evening, her face somber. "I heard something today," she said, sitting down with a cup of tea. "From a friend who knows someone at David's firm." My heart clenched. "What is it?" "He's in trouble," she said gently. "Financial trouble, it seems. A lot of his lifestyle was funded by debt. He was leveraged to the hilt, counting on your inheritance to cover it. The legal fees from the guardianship case, on top of everything else, his partners are pressuring him. There's talk of him being bought out." I stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle finally snapping into a complete, horrifying picture. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. David had been living a lie, a life of luxury built on sand, and my refusal to be liquidated had caused the entire facade to collapse. The expensive cars, the vacations, the club, memberships, Chloe's condo, Liam's startup, it was all a house of cards. And I had been the foundation they were counting on to keep it from blowing away. I thought of the pressure he must have been under, the terror of his world falling apart. It didn't excuse his cruelty, not for a second, but it explained it. He hadn't just been greedy. He'd been drowning, and he saw me as the only life raft. "Oh, David," I whispered, my hand over my mouth. "And Chloe," Eleanor continued, her voice soft. "The marketing firm she worked for. She was let go. Apparently, her influencer side gig had started to negatively affect the company's image after all the drama. And Liam's new startup had failed to secure its second round of funding. The golden children were tarnishing." I felt sick. This was the reckoning. Not one I had orchestrated, but one they had brought upon themselves. Their entire world, the beautiful, shiny, expensive world they had flaunted in that digital picture frame, was crumbling. And it was crumbling because the bank of Mom and Dad had suddenly, unexpectedly, foreclosed. I had wanted to give them a lesson about love and money. Instead, I had given them a lesson in financial reality. I didn't know what to do. A part of me wanted to reach out, to throw them a lifeline. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that any money I gave them now would only be a temporary fix. It would not teach them anything. It would only reinforce their belief that I existed to fund their failures. Clara, when I told her, was characteristically unsentimental. "Good," she said. "Let them fail. Let them learn what it's like to have to work for a living, to stand on their own 2 feet. It's the best gift you could ever give them." Grace, of course, wept. "That poor boy. That poor family. All that pressure. Maybe now that they've hit bottom, they can see clearly. Maybe now they can come back to you, not for money, but for love." I wasn't sure I believed that. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too profound. A few days later, I was working in my garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. It was a modest, sensible sedan. The door opened and my son, David, got out. He looked different. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by khakis and a simple polo shirt. He looked tired. He looked his age. He walked up the path slowly, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. He stopped a few feet from me, not meeting my eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. I stood up, wiping my dirty hands on my gardening apron. "David." We stood in silence for a long moment, the chasm between us wider than ever. I heard about your troubles," I said finally. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah. I'll bet you did. The whole town has, I imagine. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. He looked at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw my son in his eyes. Not the avaricious stranger, but the little boy who used to cry when he skinned his knee. Are you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Are you really? I'm sorry you're in pain, I said carefully. I'm sorry your world is falling apart. But I am not sorry for protecting myself. He nodded, looking down at his shoes. The house of cards, he muttered. Sandra, the kids, we just got in so deep. We were always chasing the next thing, the bigger thing. And I always thought you were there. The safety net. I was your mother, David. Not a safety net. I know that now, he said, and a tear traced a path through the stubble on his cheek. I know that now. It's too late, but I know it. He looked broken. Truly, utterly broken. The reckoning had come for him, and it had left him with nothing but the truth. And the truth was that he had sacrificed his mother on the altar of his own ambition and greed. He turned to leave. David, I called out. He stopped, but didn't turn around. The door is never closed for my son, I said, my voice trembling. But it is closed for the man who tried to have me declared incompetent. When you are ready to be my son again, you know where to find me. He stood there for a moment, his back to me, his shoulders shaking. Then he got in his car and drove away. I sank onto my gardening stool, the strength gone from my legs. I had faced my enemy and found my son. And the pain of it was worse than any courtroom battle, any smear campaign. The reckoning was not just for them. It was for me, too, and I wasn't sure which of us had lost more. The encounter with David left me emotionally raw for days. It was one thing to theorize about his downfall. It was another to see the living, breathing evidence of it in my own driveway. The victory I had fought for felt ashen, bitter. I threw myself into my work with the trust. It was my therapy, my redemption. If I couldn't fix my own family, I could at least try to fix a tiny corner of the world. I established a scholarship at the local community college for non-traditional students, people returning to school later in life, single parents, folks who just needed a second chance. I called it the Harold Thompson Second Chance Scholarship because everyone, I had come to believe, deserved one. I funded a birthday bonanza program through a local foster care agency, ensuring that every child in the system got a proper birthday party with a cake, presents, and someone to sing to them. I thought of my own uneaten birthday cake and felt a small, satisfying click, as if I was correcting a cosmic imbalance. With each check I signed, with each press release that went out, I felt a little piece of my soul settle back into place. This was my legacy. Not a sprawling, unhappy house waiting to be fought over, but 1,000 small acts of kindness rippling out into the world. It was a legacy that could not be spent, only paid forward. One afternoon, I was in Michael Barrett's office, reviewing the trust's financials. The numbers were healthy. We had given away a substantial amount, but the investments were sound. The work would continue long after I was gone. You've done an incredible thing here, Ruth, Michael said, looking over the statements. This trust will do more good than you can possibly imagine. It already has, I said, smiling. It saved me. As I was leaving, I ran into David's lawyer in the hallway. The slick, expensive man from the guardianship hearing. He looked less slick today. He gave me a tight, uncomfortable nod. Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Albright, I replied. He hesitated, then said, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For my pardon, all that. It's not always easy, this job. Clients, they don't always tell you the whole story. I looked at him, this man who had tried to have me declared incompetent. I saw the weariness in his eyes, the moral compromise. I felt no anger toward him. He was just a tool. We all have our paths, Mr. Albright, I said. I hope you find yours. I walked out, leaving him standing in the hallway, looking strangely chastened. The true marker of my new legacy, however, came from an unexpected source, Liam. He showed up at my door one evening, looking uncomfortable and younger than his years. He was driving a used practical car now, not the flashy sports car from the photos. "Nana," he said, shuffling his feet. Can I come in?" I was wary, but I let him in. He sat on the edge of the sofa, not looking at me. I got a job," he said. "A real one. It's in support. It's not glamorous, but it's a job." "I'm glad to hear that, Liam," I said sincerely. "And I'm sorry," he blurted out, his face red. "For the things I said. For everything. I was a jerk. We all were. I didn't know any other way. It was just what we did. Take from you. I see that now." It was the first real, unprompted apology I had received from any of them. It wasn't sophisticated or eloquent, but it was real. It came from a place of having fallen and having to pick himself up. "Thank you, Liam," I said, my throat tight. "That means a great deal to me." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I swear. I wanted you to know." We talked for a little while longer. He told me about his new apartment, a small studio he was sharing with a roommate. He told me about the humbling process of applying for jobs without his father's name to open doors. He was learning, the hard way, the value of things. When he left, he didn't ask for money. He didn't hint at a gift. He just gave me an awkward hug and said, "I'll try to come by again sometime, if that's okay." "It's always okay, Liam," I said. I watched him drive away in his sensible car. It was a small thing, a cracked door where once there had been a solid wall, but it was a start. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, looking up at the stars. Then, my great-nephew had helped me realign my telescope, and the sky seemed clearer, closer than it had in years. I thought about legacy. I had thought it was about blood, about passing down a name and a property. I had been so wrong. Legacy was about values. It was about what you taught people, through your actions, about what mattered. I had tried to teach my blood family about love, and I had failed. But in my failure, I had perhaps accidentally taught Liam a lesson about humility and hard work. I was teaching my new family, Eleanor, Ben, and Lily, about connection and acceptance. And through the trust, I was teaching complete strangers that kindness existed, that a hand could be reached out without expecting anything in return. My legacy wasn't a single thing to be inherited. It was 1,000 small lessons, scattered like seeds on the wind. Some would land on barren soil, like David's heart, but others, like Liam's, might yet take root. The old legacy, the one of money and property and entitlement, was dying, and a new one was being born in its place. A legacy not of what I left behind, but of what I had given away. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt not just at peace, but truly, deeply proud. The seasons turned. The vibrant greens of summer gave way to the fiery blaze of autumn, and then to the stark, bare beauty of winter. My life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. My days were filled with the quiet joys I had reclaimed. My garden put to bed for the winter, my quilting projects, my meetings with Michael Barrett to direct the Trust's funds. My relationship with Eleanor and her children deepened. Ben came over most weekends to stargaze, and we'd spend hours on the porch, wrapped in blankets, him telling me about the life cycles of stars, me telling him stories about his grandfather. Lily's collages covered my refrigerator, bursts of color and life against the white surface. They called me Aunt Ruth, and the title felt more real, more earned than Nana ever had. Liam visited a handful of times. The conversations were still awkward, stilted, but he came. He once helped me put up my storm windows, a simple, domestic act that felt more significant than any birthday gift he'd ever given me. He was trying. The door was open, just a crack. David and Chloe remained radio silent. I heard through the grapevine that David had taken a job with a smaller firm in a neighboring city, a step down in every way. Chloe had moved back home. The reckoning was ongoing for them. I prayed for them, not with bitterness, but with a sad, distant hope that one day they too would find their way. It was as I was addressing Christmas cards to Grace, Clara, Eleanor's family, a few old friends, that the idea came to me. The last gift. I had been giving away money to strangers, to causes, to institutions. But there was one person left who deserved a gift, not from the trust, but from me. A gift that wasn't about money, but about freedom. I called Michael Barrett. Michael, I want to give the house away. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Ruth, are you sure? This is your home. It's a house full of ghosts, Michael, I said softly. Wonderful ghosts, painful ghosts, but I'm ready to let them rest. I want to give it to Eleanor and her family. You'll have to pay a significant gift tax, he warned. I don't care, I said. Let the government have its share. The rest will be hers, free and clear. I'll draw up a life estate. I get to live here until I die. But after that, it's theirs. No inheritance tax, no probate. No fight, it just passes to them. I could almost hear him smiling over the phone. It's a brilliant solution, Ruth. It protects the asset completely from any challenge David might try to mount after you're gone. And it gives Eleanor and her children a real, tangible legacy from their father. That's what I want, I said. A clean legacy. A happy one. The paperwork was complex, but Michael handled it. I didn't tell Eleanor until it was all finalized. I invited her and her family over for a special dinner. I made Harold's favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, and Lily's favorite dessert, my peach cobbler. After dinner, when we were all sitting around the table, comfortable and full, I brought out a large, flat box wrapped in simple brown paper. This is for all of you, I said, placing it in front of Eleanor. An early Christmas present. She looked puzzled, but smiled. Ruth, you shouldn't have. Open it, I said. She carefully untied the string and peeled back the paper. Inside was a beautiful, hand-drawn deed for the house, framed. Underneath the glass was the official document transferring the title to her, with the life estate clause for me. She stared at it, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then, as understanding dawned, her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked from the deed to me, speechless. Ruth, what is this? It's your home, I said simply. Ours, for as long as I'm here. And then yours. Your father built this life with me. It's only right that you should have a share of it. Mark, her husband, looked stunned. Ben and Lily were quiet, sensing the importance of the moment. I can't accept this, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's too much. It's not too much, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. It's just enough. It's a home for your family. A place for Ben to stargaze and for Lily to make her collages. A place for new memories. It's what your father would have wanted. I'm sure of it. She stood up and came around the table, pulling me into a tight, weeping hug. Thank you, she sobbed into my shoulder. Thank you, Ruth, for everything. We all cried then, even Ben, who tried to hide it. We were a family, bound not just by blood or law, but by choice, by hardship, and by this incredible, unexpected gift. Later, As they were getting ready to leave, Eleanor held the framed deed in her hands, looking at it with a kind of reverent awe. "You've given us so much," she said. "A family, a history, a home. How can we ever thank you?" "You already have," I said, smiling through my own tears. "By being exactly who you are." That night, after they left, I walked through the quiet house. I touched the walls, the furniture, the memories. But they felt different now, lighter. The weight of expectation was gone. The house was no longer an asset to be managed, an inheritance to be fought over. It was just a home again, a home that was loved, and would continue to be loved, by a new family. It was the last and greatest gift I could give. And in giving it, I had finally, truly, set myself free. Christmas morning dawned crisp and white, a gentle snow having fallen overnight, draping the world in a silent, clean blanket. The house was warm, filled with the scents of pine and cinnamon. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. Eleanor, Mark, Ben, and Lily had arrived the night before, their car packed with presents and laughter. We'd decorated the tree together, Ben stringing the lights with a teenager's meticulous care, Lily hanging ornaments with explosive, joyful energy. We'd drunk hot chocolate and listened to old Christmas records, the very ones Harold and I had played when David was a boy. Now, on Christmas morning, the tree lights glowed, and a fire crackled in the hearth. We sat in our pajamas, a pile of torn wrapping paper growing at our feet. The gifts were simple, thoughtful. Ben gave me a new star chart. Lily gave me a college she'd made of my garden. Eleanor and Mark gave me a beautiful, soft blanket for my armchair. It was perfect. It was everything I had ever wanted a family Christmas to be. Warm, loud, messy, and full of love. And then the doorbell rang. We all fell silent, looking at each other. Who would be here on Christmas morning? "I'll get it," Mark said, getting up. He opened the door, and there, standing on my porch in the falling snow, was Liam. He was alone, holding a small, clumsily wrapped gift. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "Liam," I said, standing up. Come in, out of the cold." He stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked around the room, taking in the tree, the fire, the new family gathered there. His eyes lingered on Eleanor, and I saw a complex mix of emotions cross his face: curiosity, resentment, and a dawning acceptance. I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, his voice low. "You're not interrupting," I said. "Your family. This is Eleanor, your aunt, and her husband, Mark, and your cousins, Ben and Lily." The introductions were awkward, but everyone was polite. Liam nodded, his hands shoved in his pockets. I wanted to give you this," he said, holding out the small gift to me. "It's not much." I took it and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small, wooden birdhouse. It was clearly handmade, the cuts a little uneven, the finish a bit rough. But it was beautiful. He had made it himself. "I've been taking a woodworking class," he said, not meeting my eyes. "At the community center. To, de-stress." I held the birdhouse in my hands, this simple, honest, painstakingly made object. It was worth more to me than every expensive, thoughtless gift he had ever given me combined. "Liam," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "it's the most wonderful gift I've ever received." His head shot up, and he looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second I saw the little boy he used to be, beaming with pride at a finger painting he'd made just for me. "Really?" he asked, his voice small. "Really," I said. I walked over to the Christmas tree and found a prominent spot for it, right near the front. "It's perfect." He stayed for an hour. He drank a cup of coffee. He talked to Ben about video games for a few minutes. It was stilted and strange, but it was a beginning. A fragile, new beginning. When he left, he gave me a quick, awkward hug. "Merry Christmas, Nana." "Merry Christmas, Liam." I stood at the door and watched him walk to his car. The snow was still falling, covering his footprints almost as soon as he made them. A clean slate. I closed the door and turned back to my new, complicated, beautiful family. The birdhouse sat under the tree, a small, wooden promise. The past was not forgotten. The wounds were not fully healed. But in that moment, surrounded by the people I loved and who loved me, for who I was, not for what I had, I felt a peace so profound it was almost dizzying. This was my Christmas miracle. Not a reconciliation, but a possibility. Not an ending, but a beginning. And it was enough. It was more than enough. The new year arrived quietly. The holidays had been a time of profound emotional upheaval, a whirlwind of joy and sorrow, endings and beginnings. Now, in the stark stillness of January, I had time to reflect, to take stock of the battlefield my life had become, and to survey the peace I had won. It was a complicated peace. It wasn't the peace of a happy family reunion, with all grievances forgiven and forgotten. That was a fairy tale, and I was done with fairy tales. This was the peace of acceptance. The peace of letting go. I had let go of the dream of the perfect family. I had let go of the image of my son as the honorable man I'd raised him to be. I had let go of the expectation that my grandchildren would be my companions in my old age. Letting go of those dreams was like shedding a heavy, ill-fitting coat I'd been wearing for decades. I felt lighter, freer, even as the loss left me feeling the cold. I had also let go of my money, my house, the material things I had spent a lifetime accumulating. But in letting them go, I had not lost them. I had transformed them. The money had become a force for good in the world. The house had become a home for a new generation, a bridge across time connecting Harold's past to a hopeful future. In giving everything away, I had gained more than I could have ever imagined. One afternoon, I was going through a box of old papers in the attic, deciding what to keep and what to shred. I found a folder of David's old school reports. A plus on a science project about volcanoes, a carefully written essay on To Kill a Mockingbird, a Mother's Day card he'd made in first grade with crooked letters, "I love you, Mom, you are the best." I sat on the dusty floorboards and wept. I wept for the little boy with a gap-toothed smile. I wept for the man he had become. I wept for the relationship we had lost. I let the grief wash over me, and I didn't try to stop it. After a long time, the tears subsided. I carefully placed the folder back in the box. I wouldn't throw it away. Those memories were still precious. They were just archived. They belonged to a different Ruth, a different David, a different time. I went downstairs and made a cup of tea. I looked around my home. It was the same house, but it was different. It was no longer a museum to a lost past. It was a living, breathing space, filled with Lily's art on the fridge, Ben's star charts on the desk, and the quiet, steady presence of a future that was still being written. Clara came over that evening. She noticed the change in me immediately. "You look settled," she said, studying me over the rim of her teacup. "I am," I said. "I've made my peace." "With them?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "No," I said. "With myself. I've accepted that I can't change them. I can only change how I respond to them. And I choose not to respond with anger or bitterness anymore. It's too exhausting." Clara nodded slowly. "That's wisdom, Ruth. Took you long enough to find it." I laughed. "Well, I'm a slow learner." "What about David?" she asked. "If he showed up tomorrow, hat in hand, what would you do?" I thought about it. I thought about the broken man in my driveway. I thought about the little boy in the attic. I would tell him that I love him, I said quietly, and that I forgive him, but I would not give him a single dollar. And I would not let him back into my life until he could prove, through 1,000 small actions, that he was there for me, and not for my bank account. Clara raised her teacup in a salute. That, my dear, is the definition of having your cake and eating it too. Love without capitulation. I'm impressed. It was the greatest compliment she had ever paid me. The peace I had found was not passive, it was an active, daily choice. A choice to focus on the love I had, not the love I had lost. A choice to find joy in the present, not sorrow in the past. A choice to build, rather than to defend. I had spent a year fighting a war for my soul. And I had emerged victorious, not because I had destroyed my enemies, but because I had refused to let them destroy me. I had reclaimed my life, my money, and my story. And in the quiet of that winter, surrounded by the gentle peace of letting go, I realized something wonderful. The best part of my life wasn't behind me. It was happening right now. So, that's my story. The story of a grandmother who was loved for her money and what she did about it. If you're listening to this, perhaps you're facing your own battles. Maybe it's with your children, your family, your friends. Maybe you feel taken for granted, invisible, or valued for what you can provide rather than for who you are. If that's you, then sit with Auntie Ruth for a moment. Let me share the lessons I learned in the fire. They were expensive lessons, paid for with tears and heartbreak, but they are yours now, for free. First, love should not be a transaction. If you find yourself keeping a mental ledger of what you've given and what you've received in return, that's not love. That's a business relationship. And you are not a business. You are a heart and a soul, and you deserve to be loved for those things alone. Second, your worth is not your net worth. You are not the sum of your possessions, your bank account, or your property. You are the sum of your kindness, your laughter, your resilience, and the love you have shared. Don't let anyone, especially those who share your blood, convince you otherwise. Third, it is never too late to start over. I was 74 when my world fell apart. I thought my life was essentially over, that I was just waiting for the shit to end. But I was wrong. The most important chapter of my life began the day I decided to fight for myself. You can reclaim your power, your joy, your voice at any age. Don't let anyone put you out to pasture before you're ready. Fourth, and this is a hard one, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop giving them money. Enabling dependency is not love. Funding entitlement is not love. True love sometimes means saying no. It means allowing people to fail, to struggle, to learn the value of things on their own. It is the hardest gift to give, but often the most necessary. And finally, family is not always about blood. Family is the circle of people who see you, who cherish you, who stand with you in the storm. They are the ones you choose, and the ones who choose you back, without a spreadsheet or a calculator in sight. Hold those people close, cherish them, invest in them, for they are your true inheritance. As for my biological family, the story isn't over. Liam is trying, and for that, I am grateful. The door is open a crack, and a little light is getting in. David and Chloe, well, their path is their own to walk. I hold them in my heart with a kind of distant, prayerful love. I have released them, not from my affection, but from my expectations. Their journey back to themselves, if it ever happens, will be long and hard. I can't walk it for them. My life now is simple. It is filled with my garden, my quilts, my books, and the wonderful, chaotic, loving presence of Eleanor, Mark, Ben, and Lily. The Harold and Ruth Thompson Trust continues its work, a quiet engine of goodness in the world, and I, Ruth, am finally, truly at peace. I gave it all away, the money, the house, the weight of expectation. And in return, I was given everything, my freedom, my joy, and myself. So, if you take only one thing from my story, let it be this: you are the author of your own life. Don't let anyone else, not even those you love most, hold the pen. Write a story of courage, write a story of self-respect. Write a story where the final, beautiful lesson is that sometimes the greatest wealth is found not in what you keep, but in what you have the courage to give away. With all my love, Auntie Ruth. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.